good morning. I'm Ileana Smith. I use she, her, aya pronouns, and I'm the Diversity and Equity Coordinator here with Starkmar. This is our Minds Matter Exploring Neurodiversity Together population-focused learning series training. So many words. But I'm really, really excited for this training. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time throughout your really busy schedules to attend this and really be part of an advocacy and awareness and support for the one of many different communities here in Stark County and wherever you're coming from. These two doors, so the exit door on what would be my left and then that middle door next to the double doors, please utilize those two if you need to use the restrooms. Women's restrooms are to the left, men's are to the right and through the doors that you came in. There's coffee, there's water, there's cookies. Feel free to grab some. There's fidget toys on each of your tables, so if you need to kind of distract yourself and get back into the focus, please utilize those. There is a fire drill at 11:15. It's intentional, so we will be taking a break a few minutes before that, but you do not need to leave the building. So I'll call for a break. We'll go for a break. You're free to get up, stretch, but you don't need to leave the building for the fire drill. So with that, I will pass it off to Jess. Thank you, everyone.
I set up an obstacle course with the cord up here for everyone that comes up, so be mindful of that. So I am Jess. I have my next slide explains a little bit who I am as a human, but I like to give people the overview of the things that I will be giving you all the mouth words for to explain and whatnot. I'm definitely a very conversationalist type presenter. I've done a couple different speaking engagements before, so I love that you guys all have little notepads and writing things there. So if you have a question or whatnot, I know we're accommodating around our fun fire drill for a little bit, so I'll talk a little bit longer so we butt kind of up to that fire drill, and then if you guys have questions along the way, jot it down. You're welcome to raise your hand and ask me a question on the fly too, here for that as well. So super excited to be here today. So going to go over some of the different logistical things. I was talking to Ileana a little bit kind of about what's like the vibe. What are we looking for more so with like understanding neurodiversity, because that's a very big label. And being all humans in behavioral health and like working with different populations and whatnot, or being a community member, like there's a lot of language and buzzwords that bounce around when we talk about neurodiversity. It's a very big umbrella term. So how do we make that in the most human-centered language so we can all kind of have like a baseline framework of what we're working with to be able to educate parents, other educators working in behavioral health, being able to like explain that to multiple different demographics of people looking to learn a little bit more. So this is the too long didn't read version of all the different buzz points that I'll go over, so feel free, again, to ask questions at any of the things. Oh, maybe it likes me. Or not. So this is me. This is my most adult form of clothes. One of the things about me is I definitely work with people about being authentically who you are and being comfortable in all different forms and creating a society that works for you. We definitely have a lot of societal norms that we're working through and whatnot. So being able to be the most authentic version of you is kind of a crux point of some of the neurodiversity things that I'm going to get into and talk to you a little bit. So me as a person, I own a private practice in the area in North Canton called Creating Core Connections. My specialty areas, I guess I would say, are more trauma-focused care. I'm an EMDR trained clinician, so I can do some of the bilateral stimulation-like activities to help reprocess traumatic events. I work a lot with the queer community and do a lot of advocacy and support as a queer human and whatnot. So visibility, working with all that and that demographic. So there is definitely a overlap in also the neurospicy, neurodiverse community, especially being a professor working at the University of Mount Union. I adjunct in the psychology department there, teach intro, probably acquiring more courses the more time I spend there, as we do in higher ed and behavioral health. We just become the expert at many things and all the different titles and whatnot. So I got my Bachelor of Science there at Mount Union, so I was excited they decided I was like competent enough to come back and do the thing. And then got my master's at Walsh University. So my framework with some of the things, I've worked in advocacy. I was a behavioral therapist intern at Cleveland Clinic Center for Autism back in the day, worked with ARC of Ohio, do some of these different speaking engagements for engaging your brain, body, somatic system and whatnot, modifying for trauma, working with queer advocacy and youth and that kind of stuff. So Also in working a little bit with some crisis intervention stuff while I was at Walsh doing the graduate hall coordinator position. I worked in residence life, higher ed, commuter services, preview orientation a little bit. So definitely the gambit of humans and lots of different age frames and whatnot, and seeing how to accommodate to all that. So this was the kind of summary of the training we had put together. Ileana and I wordsmithed it out a little bit. But the main points here is we're looking at how we recognize different people, how we come together with our different neurological differences and whatnot. So this category has definitely added a twist on our day-to-day lives and how we're interacting with people. When we hear neurodiversity, there's a lot of different buzzwords and different diagnostic labels that go with that. So you hear a lot about like autism, ADHD, and whatnot with neurodiversity. So kind of even taking a step back from those specific diagnoses in general. My goal was to give you guys kind of the overview of how we're doing that to everyone that kind of fits under that blanket label. So these are a lot of the buzzwords we hear. So the neuro words that when I refer and talked about for the purpose of the presentation, we have the neurodivergent category. So that's basically someone your brain performs differently than what society considers the norm or the typical. We definitely, especially from the millennials on, are experiencing rapid changes in like what the norm is, how we've grown up, different interaction styles. So we're seeing a lot of shifts from demographic to demographic about how we're engaging with the world, like what accommodations we need, how we learn best. We have different resources available that were right on the cusp and very different as the millennial demographic that still had the flip phone and switched over into the rapid awareness of technology. So with all the rapid technology, we've been able to spread information like these words and whatnot. If you're social media humans and scroll on your feed, you've probably seen a lot of different diagnoses, associations, and whatnot when you hear that neurodiversity, neurodivergent category. That neurotypical, that's basically the societal normative, how humans like function day to day if you don't have any technical diagnosis or whatnot, or what is the societal normative thing. But we're learning more and more that brains all work differently. So everybody needs your own sense of like a reasonable accommodation to things. Neurodiverse is when we talk about just a group of all humans together. The neurotype is just a more neutral identifier to identify a mental health diagnosis, if you're looking for a more blanket term. Now, the different diagnoses that we see, I know you guys had a previous presentation more deep diving on autism or whatnot, but when you think of the neurodiverse, neurodivergent category, the autism spectrum, attention deficit, difficulty learning, the different dysphagia level like diagnoses. We're looking at impairments with math, reading, writing, intellectual disabilities. My more specific area of expertise is going to be the mental health category as a licensed professional counselor. And so those are the main diagnostic labels. But the new associations that we're hearing a little bit more about are things like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is associated with more the ADHD diagnostic label, just essentially that not quite able to connect to people, and almost like that fear cognitive distortion of like we are like rejected, we're not like our authentic self, like the very nervousness that kind of comes around this as being hyper aware of your environment and how others are maybe perceiving you. That pathological demand avoidance is a newer buzzword we've been learning about in the behavioral component of humans who are on the autism spectrum. Like when we are setting expectations and standards of how we would like them to fit in maybe a more neurotypically social normative category, that aggressive level of that fight back from what is how their brain typically processes because it's a new information point thing for them. So my framework and specialties that I see a lot of overlap with that. Working for trauma. Trauma is essentially just the word that from the Greek origins is a wound. So working in behavioral health, I'm working to help accommodate and people heal from those stressor things that are prompting non-preferred emotions and whatnot. And so how do you accommodate that and work through that? You don't have to have PTSD to have trauma or whatnot. We vicariously, through living, experience stressful experiences, and how our brain responds to that and stores that is really the key difference with some of those things. So looking at working with the community, advocating for people with different needs, how we accommodate that, how we use language that is communicating with people that we're interested and open in learning about them as a person, and fostering an environment where you can authentically be you and talk about it in that way. So I've learned through doing the presentations as a lecturer, as a professor, that my college students really like the summarized, too long, didn't read version, so they can get the main points of it as they're taking notes. So we've got the data. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain, how we do this from like a more person-centered approach, supporting others, and some of the resources and whatnot that I look under the holistic wellness label and kind of modify like my practice to work with people on whatever category that they need support in. Your little papers and whatnot that printed out there are going to be one of the activities that we do that kind of looks at that holistic wellness and like my goals with working for clients too. But that's towards the end. After you have to listen to me talk for a little bit, then I give you an activity to do. I always think I'm going to go point by point, but then I lie to myself and I just want it all up there so I can like pick what I want to talk about and whatnot. But so your brain as a human, this is the most complex thing that we have in any part of our body. It is one of the most integral organs that we know very little about, but are rapidly trying to understand. So it's responsible for all the things that make us a functioning human in society. So your perception, consciousness, memory, language, all those different things are what make us uniquely you. So through growing up, biological, like environmental, different things, we all teach our brains how to fire in different ways based on those different experiences. So the notion of neurodiversity is really just an acknowledgement that we all have a brain, yes, but how does that get individualized to our needs as a specific person? So lots of different nerve cells. Each neuron is the thing that fires and sends that information to each other. So when we look at some of the neurodivergent categories and talking about different humans with different diagnoses, we're really learning, and more as a society with newer technology, how we can do the fMRIs and like see different areas of the brain that light up and fire with these different neurons and whatnot. And learning about how we receive and send that information in our brain and how that impacts our ability to show up day to day, and identifying what our needs are and what needs adjusted for us to be able to engage day to day. So you get to see nerd me for a minute. Instead of data points, I went into a little bit of a deep dive on the brain for some of the things. So my main goal was kind of to do the firing points or whatnot that helps us get a baseline definition of like how our brains work, why we see different neurodiverse things. So your neurons in your system gave you the information about the brain. So our brain does lots of different things. How does our brain know to do the different things? So you have the different neurons in your nervous system. You have your interneurons, that information is integrated with your central nervous system, which I'll talk a little bit about couple slides in. But basically that's that communication with each other, the sensory and the motor neurons that our brain is firing and sending to these different areas of our body to be able to interact and move things. So you have your sensory neurons. That's going to be the information that carries to that central nervous system, the receptors, the glands, the muscles, like how we're able to move, use our senses or whatnot. You guys have probably all heard of like the different grounding activity, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with your senses or whatnot. When our brain gets overwhelmed and overstimulated, we go back to a sensory level because we have those neurons that fire in our brain that can help be exceptionally re-regulatory to our body. Now, different humans have different needs, so learning how to accommodate for that is going to be helpful in working with this demographic. And then your motor neurons, which are more the central nervous system that help your body rest and whatnot and send the different information to be able to move as well. So these are all the fun neurotransmitters that bounce around in the brain. I liked the picture image of the thing because it lets our inner science nerd like come out and see how it's actually like looked at as the cellular breakdown of it. But you have your adrenaline. That's usually one that we're typically pretty aware of, that fight or flight response. Your neuroadrenaline is your more concentration. Your dopamine hit. This is the thing that motivates you and helps you do. This is like when you need something that helps motivate you. Like if you give yourself the reward of like, I have a whole presentation to do, and maybe once I'm allowed, like once I finish with my presentation, I can acquire my dopamine hit of going to eat the ice cream that's in my fridge or watch the show that I've been putting off that I know I have to do like my adult year activities before I can get to do. Your serotonin is going to be that more mood stabilizer that helps that basis of it. Your GABA is what helps kind of calm all those things. This is the word I butcher every time, the acetylcholine. I know that's not the most proper way to do it, but that's that learning neurotransmitter that helps us, thoughts, learning, memory, and whatnot, that working one. You have your glutamine, which is more associated with your memory, and your endorphins are going to be that more euphoria, that like rush type thing. So those are the different types of neurotransmitters that we are looking to stimulate in our brain to help us do our day-to-day activities. Yes?
Would an interest in us be redeveloped, go reformed, and connect with the about the senescence of all of that?
Yes, so essentially we're looking, and I mean this occurs through all different developmental stages in life, and the more we're learning about humans and as they grow, we are seeing that these different cellular components, these neurotransmitters, essentially we need practice in being able to engage in different activities that stimulate these things. Through working with different therapeutic styles of like training your brain, we can make accommodations and work, whether that be through reprocessing traumatic events using EMDR. There's a lot of new science about brain mapping or whatnot that looks at how the different brain waves fire and whatnot, so we can train and work with our body, sometimes through assistance of medication, sometimes through more neuro-based feedback therapy, sometimes through talk therapy. We can be reframing and restructuring some of these things to essentially train our brain, like operating from the level that like there's not an additional medical diagnosis like impacting some of the things. Like not all brains are created equitable, but we're working to accommodate and kind of help grow some of these different chemicals and whatnot. Your serotonin is one that usually you hear with your basic like SSRIs and whatnot. We're looking at creating like more of those chemicals because this operates from the assumption that I think every brain can produce all of these chemicals. That's not going to be the case for every single human. Which is also when you get more into mental health and diagnosing and whatnot, diagnostic labels are important for identifying different communities. So we look at people with depression, and we've identified through research and lots of different data points that serotonin is something that impacts that. So how do we accommodate that for people? You hear people doing talk therapy and the different modalities of therapy that help they experience clinical improvement with that. So that's kind of like your little real life experience of how we can retrain and grow some of that with your brain.
To increase based off medication or training of how much is.
When we see the highest clinical effectiveness when we do a combination of both, depending on the individual. It's almost that game of like figuring out like what your brain is missing. How do you give your brain more of that? How do you support it? Because sometimes we have a brain that is producing the optimal level of serotonin, but it's not able to travel from the synapse properly. So you take different medications that basically, like, if you've been bowling, basically gives you the upper bowling for, like, your serotonin going through your brain. It sets it up so, like, if your serotonin tries to cycle back to the synapse, it blocks it and lets it, you know what I mean, move to the proper direction to give you that hit. Other people simply just don't produce enough, so then we need a different type of medication to be able to produce more so you have enough to travel to those synapses. That's probably going to be the overarching theme of the thing, is most of the questions will probably be like a yes, but it's accommodating it to the human because everybody is so different. If I had the magic formula to just equalize all of these things, I would write a book and be like probably a very popular human to have like a fix-all thing for the whatnot. But we're learning as a society to make those accommodations and study and research more things to be able to let everyone live their best life, essentially, is one of my main goals in therapy with people. Like, I want you to learn how to like accommodate to have your greatest maximum enjoyment with society, but also understanding that you are not forced to just fit in a societal label. It's your choose your own adventure game of working how that fits for you in your life. So this is nerdy me, literally from the textbook I teach from. I was very excited that I had a thing to be able to put in here too. So your nervous system, the main points that if we can get a baseline of understanding and whatnot as people is how your brain and body work. Your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system split into different parts. The central nervous system is kind of the overarching one when we look at your brain and your spine. Your brain center is the one that's sending all this information to your nervous system, and it's connected through that parasympathetic nervous system and enables different spinal reflexes. So your peripheral nervous system, that is where you're looking at more some of the brain-body connection stuff. When we talk about anything somatic. That's more your physical body. Some of the words interchange a little bit. So that is your conduit for those sensory in things that are coming in and that outgoing command for your brain to get your skeletal muscles to move. Your autonomic nervous system is going to regulate those internal bodily environment things, like the functioning of your heart rate, like your stomach operating and whatnot. Those are not things that we actively have to think about. When I eat a food, I do not have to prompt my stomach to digest the food. It's something that's occurring more automatically. So breaking down that autonomic nervous system, this is where some of the therapeutic styles that like I work with like trauma-based care, that sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. My goal for people is to help support them in those two parts of the brain being able to communicate with each other, because that is where we clinically see higher levels of ability to re-regulate and whatnot. So your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, the parasympathetic nervous system is that more rest, digest, settle response. So we want a level of both of them to interact, because a level of appropriate stress is helpful in motivating us to do the thing, like dates and deadlines for projects and stuff do. Like the level of focus I have on creating a presentation rapidly increases the closer we get to the date for the thing. So for my visual humans, that was a lot of words. Your brain and your spine and your central nervous system, the peripheral one, all those different, that's the synapse and the firing and the myelin sheath, all the data things. I won't deep dive into that for you because you don't have a quiz that you have to study for and relabel. But your somatic, that voluntary movement, that autonomic. There's your sympathetic, that muscle tightening, your parasympathetic. When we are activated and stressed, like when you hear a fire drill, we don't have to do this today, so please do not. Do you guys watch The Office at all? Little bit? That scene for the fire drill is like my favorite to refer back to. Everyone instantly panics. And like that fight or flight, we hear the fire drill, we've made the association of like we must exit the building. There's different ways to do that. Sometimes we panic if we can't get a door open and one of the characters tries to like go through the ceiling. It's like, okay, I appreciate the thought of like getting up. Other humans are trying to break down the door. We are sending signals to our muscular system. We are fighting. We are getting out of this space that may be on fire. So then your parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for calming back down after your adrenal thing has popped up to save yourself. So this is the longer version of the different things, kind of like looking at it back and forth. Your sympathetic nervous system, the different things that it impacts. So like when stressor things occur, increasing your heart rate. When you have to re-regulate from that, decreasing your heart rate to settle. When you are in that fight or flight mode, that activated mode, you're trying to survive. That is your brain and body's number one goal. So it's not going to necessarily focus on those non-essential things in that moment. It's like done the crisis risk management assessment, and it is like, like when I am running out of a building that's on fire, like I'm going to like save the pet, save the living thing, or like the essential like documents of the stuff. Like you're not necessarily going to worry about like making sure you get all your clothes out of like the washer and dryer if like the building is on fire, because we can buy more clothes and things. Your survival instinct is to like make yourself safe and have the essential things that you need. You can do it. So this was more in the written form or whatnot, and probably the things we see the most and are easiest to maybe remember when we look at our sympathetic, parasympathetic. So when we're activated, your pupils dilate, you contract your blood vessels, speed up your heart rate, speed up your breathing. You're trying to get as much power to power your body to get through the thing that is stressful. And so then after we're activated like that, our body seeks balance and homeostasis. So when we're on a big up, we like to come back down to be able to be at a middle point to function, operate day to day without a level of stress that's more crippling for us. So slowing down our heart rate, getting our breath back, stimulating digestion again to like sustain like the energy to be able to use that energy on the spot when needed in emergencies. So as a therapist, this is one of the things that I talk a lot about with clients looking for emotional re-regulation. How do we get your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system to work with each other when we have a stressful scenario and things that are going on? What are re-regulatory things that we can do to help prompt some of these things to happen, to kind of slow your heart rate, whatnot? That's why we've seen phenomenal research with like integrating specific breathing practices because it's incongruent with the behavior that is very activated with your sympathetic nervous system. We're looking for a way to get back to a balance so you don't have such a crippling fear of speaking that maybe you're not able to do it. So, talking about emotion, again, I'm a big definer of things because it helps us get a level playing field and whatnot. So, the things that go into it, we will look at our physical level, which is more your somatic, your body, and whatnot. Those are all the things, when I use one of those words, that's pretty interchangeable. So, that fight or flight, like we talked about. So, essentially, how humans have adapted and survived over the years to respond physically with their emotions. So, like, in the land of, like, dinosaurs and, like, cavemen and women, like, the survival instincts, the like getting the food, the running from threats of predators or whatnot. We've learned to adapt our physical components to keep our brain and body safe. The behavioral component, that expression of emotion based on societal expectations, culture, and whatnot. What we look for to figure out emotions, like the baseline ones of like, if someone is like happy, they might smile. If someone is sad, they might frown. We definitely look for that component of how it is expressed. Facial feedback is one of the higher ones that we like perceive emotion from other humans. Now, when we're looking at some of those more specific diagnostic things, specifically with like autism, like ADHD, whatnot, those higher like STEM-based ones that have a higher likelihood of getting overstimulated, it's harder to necessarily perceive some of these emotions of people when you're working so hard to re-regulate your own emotions, connect with your own emotions. We see a disconnect in being able to look at some of these social cues and whatnot. And then your subjective experience, the more cognitive component, is kind of one of my favorites to work with people on. So how we assess the situation, the stimulus that is coming to us based on our different environments and things that we're doing, and the emotion that we're experiencing. How do we identify that? I have a lovely little emotion wheel too that has like the breakdowns of the buzzwords of emotions, the happy, the sad. How do we get a little bit deeper? How do we identify some of these emotions from our subjective experience to be able to learn how to communicate that, to work to get different accommodations for our neurodiverse crew? So, the overview of some of the things. I'm checking in because I gave you more nerdy things where I tend to ramble a little bit. I'm also a fast talker, so you're more than welcome to yell at me and be like, chill. Like if I'm going too speedy for some of the things. But basically, we're looking at the entire human. I gave you a lot of the more definition-based stuff for that. We're made up of thoughts, feelings, sensations, attitudes, belief. Those components impact our physical and mental well-being. That's what we're looking to balance more in being able to interact with society and accommodate to our unique needs. So we're looking at how we create practices to improve our individual quality of life based on those different needs. Our societal structure is not always set up for us to be the most successful humans in life. We're living in what we call like a disembodied state, a very disconnected level of being able to interact with your brain and body, how we are presently day to day. We've specifically seen a lot of that with the short attention, the rise in the media culture, and more of these prompts of dysregulation. The internal nerd in me is always looking for research articles and podcasts and whatnot to like learn and understand the different things, especially as an educator working with college students. I definitely see a stark difference in like ability to kind of problem solve and like handle some of these different crisis-based things. So when we look at like the different cultural impacts, one of the recent research things that I just like stumbled upon in one of my podcasts is we talked about the level of stress that is a normalized level of stress that helps build some of the resilience type things. How many of you grew up with the rule that like once you were outside and doing a thing, you were not to come back in the house? Go off, play, be free, do not come and bother me. Do not come in and out of this house more than 2 times unless you are bleeding or someone is dying. Those were the frameworks, like go and do the thing. With the rapid rise in our media culture, we've kind of strayed away from some of that free play thing. Now, also growing up I was right on the cusp of that go outside and still use some of the technology things. One of the coolest things that I learned about was talking about the structure of like appropriate levels of fear and how that builds some of the resiliency and whatnot. So if you're one of the humans that like, yes, go outside and play. Typically you had a group of other people that were told to go outside and play and not go back in or not go on a technology thing. So what did we do with our little brains and like maybe lack of awareness for safety things? We found some risky activities that were super fun, gave us the dopamine hit. So might not be the same game, but did you all ever do the thing where like you set the rule, like, okay, if we're playing this game, if we're throwing rocks at each other, or like hitting each other with a stick, or like running around wild, if someone actually gets hurt, we have to stop. Like if someone's crying, if someone is like bleeding, then you were allowed to go get a parent or guardian or whatnot. So you were like, oh, there was a level of that threat, fear, awareness. The current demographic that is flooded with some of the media things, like if you're on the tech and whatnot, you do the doom scroll, you have more of a kind of like go away from your brain to be able to fill some of that because more of that was available. That appropriate level of fear gave us a rush, a thrill of like, okay, like how close can I throw the rock to the person? I know not to hit them in the head because that is like not good. That more makes them upset and then you get hurt and then you have to stop the game. Whereas like versus if you're playing a video game, there's not the same risk fear response because if your character like gets injured or dies in the game, you typically respawn and can start again. There was not a respawn if like I threw the rock and like hit a person and like was cut open, like got injured or whatnot. That was more of a risk. We were playing the game in like a level of way to like have fun and interact, but we also had the awareness that like, ooh, I have to be able to run fast, move and do the thing. So that was a way that the like different older generations were able to build a resilient skill where some of the media culture doesn't necessarily have that same framework. So how does that relate to some of the younger demographics? Probably one of the number one things I have to work and accommodate with the students in like my college classes is that problem solving awareness of some of the things. Like they want the instant gratification sometimes. Like if I give them a paper, like I did a whole class period where I talked about how to write an APA, how to do the different things, what structure format I was looking for. They're listening to me sometimes. Like sometimes I have to like ask a random off the wall question and I get a head look up every once in a while from our tech stuff. But then they're like, well, like, okay, I hear the feedback. And at one point I told them, I said, every single one of you in your paper did this part wrong. And they're like, okay. And I was like, you all can resubmit it. Here's a template of the format that it should look like. I got like 2 submissions. So I come back the next day, I was like, what did I miss? What did I not explain? They're like, well, like we're waiting for our individual feedback. And I was like, me as a human standing here gave you the group feedback that everyone needs to reformat this. But that level of problem solving stress, unless I'm specifically talking to the person, they want the security of like, this is specifically impacting me. That risk problem solving that we did of like how to keep ourselves safe running around in the wild outside throwing sticks and rocks at each other, they want that direct, secure, like they want the ability to respawn. They want that individual thing of like, I am specifically giving you or you the information of how to fix the thing. The blanket statements are missed a little bit more. So teaching people to have an awareness of that, to customize your ability to engage with things a little bit more focused and identifying areas that you need more support with and being able to advocate, ask for that. So any of my clients in therapy are probably sick of how much I talk about this because this is our baseline that I like to establish. Like, these are the things. I tell clients in therapy, your goal is to fire me as soon as possible and like just cycle back when you need me some of the times. I view therapy as a lifelong thing that like we are able to come in and out of as we need support in different areas as we grow, because I am not the same human I was 10 years ago as I learn in society and the impact of things. So these are the buzzword areas that I want people to be able to identify different needs and things that they want to advocate for. Now, looking at our neurodiverse population of humans, these are areas that are going to look way different for lots of different people. You're going to have different spiritual practices, be in different financial brackets in different stages of your life, have different emotional needs, have a different level of intellectual ability based on how your specific brain works, your specific memory, those things. All those different neurotransmitters that I talked about are going to impact how you're able to connect this wellness wheel for you. Your physical body, we're not all born with like the same level of like physicality for the things or whatnot. I pretended when I was an undergrad at Mount Union to be an athlete when we were doing like charity, like powder puff football, and intern injured my ankle and was one of the ones that had to have like surgery to put my ankle back together. My physical capacity to work out in some of the same ways needs to be modified because I have one good ankle left and now it's killing my other knee. So like a little lopsided, but we're working on it. But so the most fun one that we've seen a lot of impact, like over the years, especially with like COVID hitting, is that social connectedness and dynamic. we hear the concept of like social media is like, yeah, we have that instant access to people to be more connected, but we have this thing called diffusion of responsibility. Then that comes in to where like we're flooded with all these ways to connect with people. So like they're just there and they're a few clicks away. But how do we get that social fulfillment connection? A lot of the counseling demographic I see and work with like is very much struggling of how to connect with people, like how to find people to date and like connect with. And growing up in like time brackets that had less technology and whatnot, you were close with your community of people, and like you hear more about like people marrying their high school sweetheart and like being together for lots and lots of years. We had less access and ability to connect socially, and so therefore humans connected based on their needs and whatnot, fitting into society for that norms. We live in a different world today, so adjusting our social things to get that social need met is going to look very different for everyone. Are you sick of hearing me say that yet? Everything looks different for everybody. So sources of stress. Healthy levels of stress are helpful. They motivate us, but when it gets to the point where it's becoming more maladaptive and impacting our ability to engage with life, that's when we're looking at needing more support. That's where our neurodiverse community, we're helping identify what some of the sources of the stress are for them to help figure out those accommodations. So your biological system, like we talked about, your brain, body, the genetics, your physical ability, your ability of your brain to fire and do the things, that's going to be your framework starting. Everybody has a different starting point of that. So looking at how those circuits are shaped, developing more of that serotonin. What support do you need? Do you need a medication? Do you need a tandem of medication and talk therapy to reprocess some of that cognitive framework? Your psychological, there's so many different theories based on how we work with the psyche of the brain. All different therapists come in shapes and sizes and whatnot. So like a therapist that works for you might need a different style of therapy for something that works for someone else. And people experience what they consider success and wellness in different ways. The social conditions, those vulnerabilities that are triggered by those events, your familial conflicts, your different inter versus intrapersonal self, what stress your job is bringing, what stress education is bringing to you. Like, what are you engaging with that's prompting some of these feelings from a social condition? And then even we go a step further and taking account into those cultural like impacts on all of these things, your gender differences, cultural factors, socioeconomics factors, your different stress levels that you're exposed to. One of the things I delineate too is a trauma in the sense of what we call like a big T trauma versus a little t trauma. Trauma occurs in the existential existence of being a human. So it is how your body perceives that stress and whatnot. The big T traumas are the things that like we stereotype as like that was what PTSD trauma was, the like going to war, the like witnessing like big traumatic events. But those little T traumas are the things that like if you're like super dysregulated and had like a nuanced experience about like how you grew up with like your family and that social interaction stuff. That was not back in the day the big buzzword of like you didn't have PTSD if you didn't go to war or fight for your life. But we're seeing how some of those impacts like change how your brain receives and processes information. Like, do you all ever do the thing where like if someone texts you back with like the period or like doesn't have enough emotion in like the text message, instantly panic that you've done something wrong? You might not have had any sort of conflict whatsoever, but you might have had an experience where like you thought things were okay when you were communicating with someone, and you come to find out like later that like that person was like big mad at you and you didn't have the awareness. So now you're on edge, more stress of like, oh my goodness, like my communication style, this person was mad and I didn't know. How do I compensate for that? I overread the social cues. I might overanalyze in person like someone's facial expressions and things. I might be hyper aware of texting or whatnot. Like, never text me okay with the period. Clearly you're mad at me. Like, we make that association based on our different like cultural experiences and our social experiences that we go through. So all of these things. Burnout is more the buzzword I use. It's essentially just that overstimulation. So like we get to the point where we have reached our maximum capacity of the things. Burnout is typically the buzzword that's known more in like work environments too. Like we get overwhelmed and we get super stressed, especially when different environments are prompting that different thing. So for our neurodiverse community, we get a lot of overstimulation, we get a lot of burnout, we get those areas of wellness that are being impacted in a way that I only have so many spoons to share with the world. And like, if my environment is super stressful, I don't have enough spoons for maybe focusing on my spiritual practice because I have so much work to do or a thing due that is going to impact my ability to have like financial stability or whatnot. So we triage our wellness wheel based on what we need. When we experience burnout, like, we're dumping all of our resources and our spoons that we have maybe in one of those wellness wheel categories, and then we're like, oh no, I do not have the framework for the other categories of the things. But then without balance, like if you have a tire that like has the nail on the side and it's got like the slow leak on the side, like impacting your wheel and its ability to spin. Now, if you have multiple nails at different spots, your wheel's going to go flat way quicker unless you get the extra big gash on the tire, then it like pops out for you. So there's different levels and thresholds of things that we have as humans that, again, are different based on your brain. So these are some of the factors that we see with how we burn out people, things that we see as a whole that kind of cut that wellness wheel off a little bit and make it not be able to like spin how it optimally should. So dysfunctional environmental dynamics prompt more disconnect with people. That indirect communication, we as a society very much so struggle with how to communicate effectively. One of the baseline accommodations I start working with people that are looking to like improve their wellness wheel is looking about how we communicate. We are a very defensive society as a framework to keep ourselves safe. Having conflict in conversations can be an opportunity to grow, but if that environment feels threatening, that's really hard to do. So how do we communicate and set up an environment that feels safer to be able to do that? One of the things that I try to like drill into people, like try to do my highlights during therapy. I'm like, if you have ignored me for our 53 minutes together, this is the thing I want you to take out into the world. Communicating from a place of curiosity before we are defensive about the thing. Be open to the thing. Like, sometimes my interpretation of someone being mad versus like, no, they're just really like hyper-focused like on the thing or whatnot. Okay, that doesn't mean they're mad. My perception was mad. If someone is talking about being like super stressed about work, like you might be like, well, like you just like seem to complain about the thing, like it's really a good thing. I've made the assumption that they're like upset with like complaining about like the stress of work, but asking them like, what support do you need to maybe make that work environment better? Like, do you just want the space to vent? Do you want feedback? Like, how do we define the things in a baseline of communication that help us interact with humans that are different from one another? The unclear expectations, like if I have to do an assignment for a school thing, I need a rubric for my brain and body to feel settled to be able to do it. I need to know what you are looking from me. Ileana's like, hey, would you like to do a presentation? I was like, maybe. Like, what is this presentation on? What information would you like in this presentation? I was like, I pretend to be an expert in some things, but there's still that panic in me that's like, where is the adultier adult in the room to like be able to be the one to talk about this thing? And sometimes when it's me, I'm like, oh no, like that should not be me. But it's been an exciting growth journey to be able to learn about these different things through different work experience and whatnot that I've had. So like coming into the different values and whatnot. When a person's in an environment that doesn't allow for that safe expression, like we form like different values of things, we feel like we can't necessarily be ourselves. This is a huge part of that neurodiverse demographic and how we can support those people, like all people, is looking by how we let humans authentically show up as themselves. We hear a lot about the term masking or whatnot. Masking is essentially trying to fit in to what you're supposed to do to not stick out, because if we stick out in society, like we're under scrutiny. One of the number one feedback things I get from clients is therapy, is I am not a super formal dresser or whatnot. Like t-shirt, joggers, I like joke about like my headshot is like one of 3 times that I'm in like professional clothes. Like if I have a wedding or event or whatnot, I'm a little bit more dressed up about the thing. I am my happiest and most authentic therapist when I can rock out with like a nice pair of Nikes that like I've been super excited to buy because it had bright colors on it or whatnot. Like, and it's more comfortable. It accommodates to like my busted ankle that doesn't always operate the best way. Like it helps me be present and engaged because I'm not uncomfortable in like the sensory like stuff of like different clothes that maybe don't necessarily feel is good. I value comfort over necessarily like the aesthetic appearance. Like now that's not to say like I don't like getting dressed up and like having like a sharp suit or whatnot. Like those are things that like I enjoy, it's the little things that are important to me, but having the understanding and awareness that like I'm not less of an adult presenter because I have tennis shoes on. I think my tennis shoes look cooler than dress shoes half the time, but that's just me. Especially our humans too with anxiety. Anxiety and control are kind of some of our brother-sister pairings that go together with like feelings and whatnot. When you are a human that has more stress and anxiety, we look to see how we can control things to mitigate some of those factors to try to make ourselves feel better. Rather than focusing on hyper-controlling a thing, I want to know about the accommodations and whatnot we can do to help you feel safer when you're not in control of the thing to hopefully reduce that anxiety. So if we look at work, because that's usually the typical buzzword we hear in burnout and whatnot. So the purpose of like learning about this neurodiversity stuff is we as humans want to be able to articulate and support people in identifying these things, giving them examples of like how to modify for their lives to be able to be successful. With the society that we live in, we typically need to acquire some sort of income, which results in like needing to do a work activity. The goal is to find one that you enjoy so you don't get that burnout on. But sometimes for the sake of needing a financial bubble filled in your wellness wheel, like we take different jobs that don't necessarily align with what we want. We forget to ask people their individual needs and preferences. Journaling is an activity that I do a lot with clients in therapy. And I even tell them, anytime I get a new client for therapy, I give them a blank journal. And I was like, now, I understand that like this might be an overwhelming activity to do because we don't want to write out feelings, but I said, there's no rules with this journal. I said, if you are mad about life and want to write a list of swear words and then throw the journal somewhere, I was like, please do not hit a human because I'm not giving you a journal to injure other humans. But it's a level of engagement and an expression and an activity. I've had people before that are like, I feel like I can't like release my emotion through like writing. I was like, okay, like, is there a thing you want to do? Sometimes we have big mad feelings and they're like, I just like need something to like move my body, like get it out. I'm like, okay, do you like to work out? What do you like to do? They're like, no. I was like, okay. I was like, do you like to drive? Do you like to do the things like that? They're like, no, it's just like not like I need like something to do. And then I was like, all right. I was like, so how do we make this like an accommodation, like for you to be able to get out this big physical need? Do you all in your house have that like piece of furniture that just like travels with you, like as you go to places you're moving and whatnot, that one that's like not the best furniture you've had forever, but like it's starting to fall apart, but it's like, well, it's functional and it serves its purpose. Like that, like one that's like kind of expendable, but I've had an emotional attachment with it. I was like, do you have like a random like little furniture thing you're over? And they're like, wow, like, yeah. I was like, why don't you take it in the backyard and like smash it up? And they were like, well, that's like being too angry, like about the thing. I can't break things. I said, well, if you go into a store and break someone's furniture that you owned, like that's a societal rule that like probably an officer or someone is going to have an educational conversation with you about why are we doing this. But I said, in the safety and security of your backyard with like an old piece of furniture or whatever you've scavenged on Facebook Marketplace that like, you're like, okay, this is worth the loss. It gets out your physical need. Why is there a rule that we can't do that or whatnot? So being able to have those unique rules and like kind of gamifying your environment helps you survive in sometimes stressful work situations or life situations. So specifically with like work stuff, like why do I work? Typically a financial like buzz thing or whatnot. Us being in like community mental health and whatnot, we typically do it for the people and not the financial part. But so what do I need out of my job to feel like it's manageable for my needs? What do I need to accommodate it to that full wellness wheel? If I could have any schedule I wanted, what would it be? What would the environment be like? What skills do I enjoy like utilizing and doing? What do I want to spend more time doing? If you are using work as the token to get to your fun free time, what do you want to do in your fun free time? I asked my college students the other day, I was like, why are you here? And they all looked at me like I had grown another head. And I was like, I said, there's not a wrong answer. I said, yeah, you just have to talk to me and tell me. Mom's like, well, like to get a better job. I was like, okay, to do what? Get more money. What do you want to do with your money? Hadn't gotten that far yet. I was like, do you want to travel? Do you want to house? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to like adopt every dog and like have a rescue center, which is like my like ultimate life goal is like, I just want to collect all of the dogs and be able like, what are you working for? Like, what are you excited about like accomplishing? And not having the space to sometimes explore that. We live in that busy, stressed society. We don't have the freedom to explore some of those accommodations that we're making for ourselves. So my area of like being able to support more looks into therapy. Like, what's manageable versus needing support. When you have significant impairment in these areas, like based on your own neurodiversity, when symptoms are like getting to the point where like you're not experiencing that like good dopamine hit, that ability to like re-regulate, the ability to focus, engage, when you see the impact on all the symptoms of wellness that I've like shown you, when those are not working properly, that's a little bit more of like dysregulation, and how do we support that? So if you're avoiding activities, like if you're putting off the things to the point where like you can't like accomplish them, like everybody loves a little procrastination motivation, but sometimes it gets to the point where like you're still not able to engage with that. Our bodies, from a basis like standpoint, we need food and rest and sleep to be able to operate. I try to do the thing where I run on what I call audacity times, where I think I can do everything in like 10 minutes and like it'll be fine, but then I sometimes burn myself out in the middle of the day, and I was like, why do I have feelings right now? And I was like, I have not acquired a nutrient in like 8 hours, so I probably should feed my body so it can continue to do the things. When you have distress and impairment doing those day-to-day activities, and like if unexpected events like pop up and you're having a hard time being able to process or engage with that, like it's too sensory overload for you, those are different signs that like some of your coping things are maybe not working for you. Your wellness wheel might be a little bit off, and you need some more support to be able to interact and handle that. It also doesn't have to be when we get to the point of dysregulation. We live in a very reactionary society where we like to fix things when they start to break. How do we be a little bit more proactive? I have humans that come to counseling that don't necessarily have a specific goal that they're working on, but they want to have a space where people are asking them some of those questions, like I did with the work environment. If you don't have a stimulating social connection, yes, you can scroll on social media and see what people are doing on their highlight reel of things, but how many spaces do you actually have with people to do that deep dive like conversation? Like when we have a work environment, sometimes we focus on like complaining about the work environment and whatnot, versus like, well, what's your goal? What are you working towards? What are you doing? Looks different for everybody. So the main components of therapy in working with like the neurodiverse community, the ones that I have more specific examples for are the STAR ones. So having a better brain-body connection, improving your distress tolerance, and defining self-care. In working with the neurodiverse population, these are the biggest components and baseline things I like to teach and work with people on to try to help them define, communicate, and be able to figure out what their unique needs are to see how to make the world fit with them. This human, Dr. I always mess her name up, Mishki Reeds, is one of the leading trauma somatic therapists with mindfulness and like some of the psych research and whatnot. This somatic psychotherapy toolbox has phenomenal exercises and is a great resource as someone working in behavioral health to identify brain-body activities in a trauma-informed way. I love it because it also operates from, here is what you do as the clinician, here is what the client should receive, here is some of the feedback takeaway from stuff. I have a PDF version of the book that I think I'm allowed to share. I'll have to look at the rights of that, but I also have, that you guys are all going to get after this presentation, yes, is a neurodiversity handbook from like a peer advocate that talks about doing things from more distress tolerance, dialectical behavioral therapy from someone who is a neurodiverse human on the autism spectrum with lots of different diagnoses things. These workbooks are not to be used in like sans therapy, like still need to work with like a therapist to kind of accommodate and do some of these things. So this is not therapy in a book, but these are great resources you can use with people as behavioral health professionals too, to be able to support their growth and accommodating their needs and re-regulating their body to get them to be able to identify their needs. And even looking at, so she outlines these 7 basic body and wisdom principles. It's essentially just trauma-informed care in the way of like, how do we safely engage with our body? Like, we acknowledge that the body responds to our environment, the different things. Our body remembers things. Our somatic system definitely stores that stress and that trauma, and it activates. Those pupils dilate, your heart rate increases. Like, when situations feel similar, we are made to survive is the goal as a human. So if a situation feels similarly threatening, then we're going to try to go back to what we did to save ourselves on that. If you are a human that is neurodiverse, that can be a level of activation where your body is activating way more than maybe a more neurotypical brain, because your system is more sensory overloaded, so you're perceiving more things as threats. Changes is flexible. Again, my buzzword of the thing is accommodating to everybody. Your body's experience is transient and does not last. Sometimes we existential crisis and are like, if I feel this way now, I'm going to feel this way forever. Holding space for a distressing emotion and a hopeful emotion are ways that we can help be grounded and re-regulatory and help both our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system connect with each other.
I have a question.
Yes.
We go back to this slide. Number 7 says the body is the most important place for healing and transformation. About the brain.
So your brain is the thing that is communicating with your body, but if they're not working together, your level of ability to re-regulate your nervous system is going to impact your body in that healing transformation. So it's like the thing where like you cognitively know that like, I don't need to stress about this. This is going to pass. Like, I know that this is why I have this feeling. If your nervous system and your body doesn't believe that, that's great that you believe that in your core, but if you're not able to transfer that to your body, your nervous system is like, yeah, that's a lie. We don't actually feel that. You're still going to get those stressor responses.
But it's not saying start with the body necessarily, or it says most important.
Because regulating that nervous system is going to help your brain communicate and fire, you know what I mean, the most. If you are in that flight activation mode, like if I can't get a human if you're in the middle of an active panic attack, if I can't re-regulate your body, it doesn't matter what coping skill, like we are not in a place to receive communication. Like, especially with the neurodivergent community, if you've ever like worked with someone that's like just gone nonverbal, like we are not talking anymore. Humans experience like horrific like trauma and whatnot in like crisis community situations and whatnot. If you have like active shooting things like 9/11, like if I can't get your body to like settle enough for your nervous system to respond, which is connected to your brain, but your physical body needs a way to re-regulate, which is why we do things like engaging with our 5 senses. Because like if our brain is not working collaboratively with us, if I can at least get your senses to engage, it like calms you down enough to be able to engage with your brain, receive those messages. One of the things, like if you like the deep dive research stuff of that, is you look at the diver's response. Your body like perceives the difference when you dive into water, and it lowers your blood pressure to accommodate for that water that's like flooding around you as you get to different depths of the water. Your body instinctually adapts to reach homeostasis and whatnot in balance. So there is a therapeutic activity that you have to do safely, is like you can literally take a bowl of water if you're having like an active panic attack of ice water and like still being able to breathe. Like you have to come out of the water, we don't have gills, but like putting your face in that shifts like your brain, shifts your physical body, you're moving in a sense. That temperature, your body is not as actively trying to cognitively process some of that anxiety because it's like, oh, there's a cold sensation. I must compensate for that to kind of balance a little bit more, to then let my brain be like, oh, why is this cold? How do I problem solve? Did that?
Deep breath kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's like now we're learning more about the breathwork type stuff too, is like, okay, do like longer like holding of the breath. We talk about box breathing versus triangle breathing. Like, yeah, you can tell someone to just breathe, or like if they're upset, like just relax. That activates my whole nervous system. How dare you tell me to relax? Give me a tangible activity to do to help me relax. Like I know that's what I'm supposed to be doing. No, you're good. So working with the body. We have to make sure humans are open and receptive to working with the body. So how do we do that and set that up in a safe way? This is directly from her book. So too, that somatic psychotherapy toolbox. This is all her information that I reworded a little bit, but this all very step-by-step comes from her in the intro of the book. So, like, informed of the activities, we don't like to surprise people. We like to give people, you know what I mean, a framework for, like, what's going on. Having choice and control. Don't feel stuck to some of the things. Resources for that wellness. How we track the feedback. Like, how are you doing as a client? Are you feeling overwhelmed today? If someone has, like, a traumatic scenario or something, like, that's dysregulated in their family environment going on, and, like, maybe we were deep processing, like, more inner child work or whatnot, or like how to heal like the tinier version of us inside to be gentler with us. If like you have a sudden death or a catastrophe in the family, we have to pause some of the like inner child thing to kind of see what you need in that moment. So checking in with people and seeing how they're doing. If I have someone who's overstimulated and can't focus in therapy because I have fluorescent overhead lights, like, okay, their brain is like not processing the lights as much. How do I make the environment more matched to their vibe so they can engage with the different things? Yes. Do you want me to go back?
I think that's why it's really good to do the psychoeducation and action educate the client in a each appropriate way. And on the different levels or dimensions of themselves.
Yeah.
All of that. Because when you're talking about all the either going back to neurotransmitters and all this stuff, of course, so what you relevant to the client, but being able to kind of translate that in how the brain versus in the physical realm of ourselves have to communicate with one another, especially in a trauma spot. So I was just thinking about that. Will you get honest with you?
Yeah. Like how I'm going to explain some of these things to like a tiny human. If I were giving a presentation to like one of the like preschool classes of like, how do we like re-regulate our body? They're not. They were gone after like slide 2. Like they saw the picture of me and it's like, oh, you're the human up there. Then we're probably done. But like I'm going to talk to them about like getting an activity where like we roll a ball like back and forth. Like that's a bilateral activity. If you have a ball and you're tossing it back and forth, that's communicating with both sides of your brain and is a focus activity that's sometimes incongruent with like either a stim behavior that's maladaptive or whatnot. It's why like fidgets like work so well. It gives you a physical outlet that lets your body focus on a thing to give your brain the space to like actually process more. So for the sake of time, I'll try to be a little less wordy for some of the things, but you can also harass me when I'm sitting up here on questions and things that you have. But so we're looking at the physical, emotional, social, and sensory. These are the main components that come together that require some of the accommodations and whatnot with working with the neurodiverse population. Like, we have to take care of our physical body, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anyone that has done anything in any sort of behavioral health is, or even school, honestly, has probably been talked to about that at some point. It's a framework that we give people. We know we need food, water, shelter, and like kind of talking about that serotonin stuff, like your physical body might need medication to be able to create that serotonin. Like, there's not a way that I can outwork your brain like in a physical sense with that. How you support your emotional self, boundaries and communication. If I had like the like quick start guide to therapy, it would be like defining our boundaries, defining communication, identifying your needs, because like when you know how to accommodate for you, we can grow and do a lot more. But that also is going to involve having a sensory awareness, like giving yourself brain breaks so you can focus, like having comfortable clothes, having like, based on your own cultural experiences too, like gender affirming care and like gender affirming clothes that help you feel connected with your brain and your body. Awareness of things like volumes and spaces, like sounds, like sight of like lights and things or whatnot. Like how are you looking at that sensory input to let your brain and body settle to be able to engage with these other components? So this little packet that you guys have for like your activity, that's probably going to have to be more of an independent activity or whatnot. This neurodivergent friendly workbook this is the workbook that you guys are all going to get the PDF copy for, because it's allowed to be shared as long as you credit the person. So you can use this with clients, with people that you're working with. It's not a substitute for therapy, but it operates from that dialectic behavioral standpoint that talks about using your emotional mind, your cognitive mind, and like how we blend that together to get to a balanced, like wise mind to work on these distress tolerance skills. So that's a style I adopt and use a lot with people in therapy, like regardless of diagnostic style, because we live in a world where lots of things are going on at once. So I want to teach humans how to like enjoy experiences, be present in the experiences, get that sensory input they need, also being able to manage the stress that can come along with it too. So it focuses pretty much on helping increase that awareness of emotional and cognitive control with the different behaviors, coping skills, and whatnot, and reducing that stress. So, and again, you'll get access to this whole workbook, but these were like the highlight pages and whatnot that all remind Ileana, like the buzzword pages that make me the happiest in the thing, but looking at how we get into a wise mind. And do you see the language? We're not saying that like oh, your brain's not working like typically, or like, oh, like you're just being too stressed, like just calm down. We're like, okay, maybe you have an emotional need. Maybe your logical brain, like cognitively knows you need to relax, but your emotional brain's not cooperating with you. We want a balance of both. How do I help you get a wise mind? So like accommodating to the humans that are tinier, like from your earlier question. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I know I caught you off guard. Oh, I can't read. Summer, I love it. We're hopeful. One day, Summer. But, so like, you can talk to the tiny humans about like their wise mind. Like, hey, you have big feelings, and like, you also have a brain that wants to like give you all the like facts of the things, like all the different like things, you know, like, you know, your ABCs, like those are like fact things that you learn. So how do we make it work as a team? Anytime you can make a game out of a thing, or like make it a little bit of a competition, the tiny humans are like, okay, like, I will do the thing. So like modifying that in the language to your audience. Mindfulness, this is a huge buzzword that gets lots of different definitions of things. You don't have to have a quiet mind to be mindful, is if I could give you a piece of thing to remember. Like that distress tolerance stuff is why I like the DBT style, because you can be an anxious, rapid thought person, and meditating and being mindful is not deleting those things. It's working with it in a way that is helping you be more present and a little less stressed. So your homework activity that you all will do is, how do you make support and accommodations? This is like a more simplistic like model of like that wellness wheel of different things that you need, and like defining some of those things and whatnot. Your finances, your sensory, your daily living. My wellness one is basically the overview for all humans, but when I'm working specifically with clients that have a little bit more neurodiverse diagnoses that are impacting the sensory stuff, we kind of hone it down a little bit more into some of the like basic things and add a sensory component, add a communication component, add how they adjust their daily living things, because we have an awareness of that wellness wheel from the different main categories, but this is how we break it down and make it more individualized for us. We all have different needs in like these different categories based on what we're doing. So the first one is just kind of an example of one. The little triangles in the middle, we're just picking a color for you. I think that's rude. I wanted to pick my own color, but fine. But like, then it's like a 1 through 5 thing. So like, it operationalizes the definition too. Like, is this something, we want to focus on skills because we are good at things too. Sometimes we beat ourselves up for like what we're not doing well as an overstimulated human in life and society. So let's look at our strengths. What are you good at? How would you rate how you're good at? Let's put it on a visual thing so you can see in like your emotion wheel, like what you need to grow in some of the areas to help it be a little bit more balanced. So looking at those things, like I defined like sleep, work, and study. Well, this book did. And so it's like, these are what we're looking for. How would you rate yourself in this? Like, what are some areas that are impacted the most when some of your stress gets high? That's sometimes the key difference. We might be able to know we need help in a thing, but slowing down and figuring out the awareness of what is more impacted when these different things get out of whack. Like, what's impacted or whatnot? If I'm overstimulated, what little bubble of the wheel kind of just goes away? What do we pop? So then the areas where you need the most support, how do we figure out the accommodations? Like, do you need an accommodation? Does your environment need to be pitch black to sleep? Do you need some sort of like white noise in the background? Like, how do you accomplish this? How do you get the thing you need to help your brain be individualized for you to engage in the things that you need to do for life? So we talk about self-care, but again, we don't always define the things. How do you set boundaries for you? What are the things that recharge you? How do you fit them in to do that? What's an outlet for each of those areas of wellness? Like, you need like a go-to thing, so when your brain gets panicked, it has like a default activity. Like, we try to identify those things before we get more stressed, so we have like a toolbox of things to do to be able to be more successful. Scheduling downtime or a low stimulation time. Like, sometimes the thought when I tell people, like, what if you sat for 15 minutes and did nothing? No phone or anything. Clients are like, I don't have time for that. And I was like, we can do it in session for 15 minutes while you're here. I was like, do nothing. We're just going to sit here and exist. That level of like uncomfortable and not sure what to do. Sometimes just sitting with that can give you an awareness of some of your needs and how to do more self-care things. Being gentle with your brain. That's also like one of my too long didn't read buzzwords. Like, just be gentle. Like, it's okay that you have the thoughts and feelings and things that you do. We're working on supporting and doing those things in a way that works for you. So that is my whole spiel on all of the different things. I'll have Ileana share like my contact information too. I absolutely love to network and be social and talk with people. You are welcome to come visit my office. It's in a little holistic wellness center. We do some pretty cool things. Anyone who's interested in therapy whatsoever, like, does not need to do therapy with me. I do free 15 to 30 minute consultations with anyone that is overwhelmed and like not sure how to engage with therapy, to help them kind of figure out what they need, what they're wanting from therapy, what's a good match of a human that fits with you. I tell people, if you come and talk to me for 15 minutes and I'm not your vibe, that's okay. I'm not offended. I want to like help you play the game of life the most successfully. Let's find a human that works for you. So happy to connect, network. If you are curious about therapy and want to start therapy, like, come chat with me. I like to help humans engage in that process. So any questions right off the rip, or you can just bother me at the panel too.
We'll be getting a copy of this slideshow.
Yes, I'm going to go back. I did the thing where I panicked that I'm not going to have enough to talk about, which has never occurred in my existence as a presenter. So like, I word vomit all the information and then just kind of go with the flow of like what pops up in my brain.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started right into our panelist questions, our Q&A. So I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves, just give a really quick introduction. Everyone does have their bios in the kind of agenda for the day. And then also at the end of the agenda, there is a QR code for the evaluation for this training. So at the end of the training, or, you know, after your free time, if you could please just fill that out, give us some feedback. We definitely appreciate it. So I will go ahead and let our panelists just give a brief introduction about themselves.
Well, I'm Jess.
I'm not a... Okay.
And then, okay, it's not as aggressive as I thought it was going to be. Well, I'm Jess. You all just got to listen to me talk for about an hour about the things, but I like to think I'm a cool human. I have a private practice and teach at Mount Union, and I like to talk about your brain and your body.
I'm an ex-professional football player, and I'm the executive director of Beautiful Minds Group, an organization that works with individuals with autism.
Hello, I'm Corey Woodland. I am on the spectrum, and according to humans around me, probably also have ADHD. I do personal advocacy, and I just started doing some peer support work.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to open up with a first general question. I do have some questions for our panelists, just a little bit into each of their specialties. But of course, if anyone in the audience has questions, just raise your hand, because I do want this to be the time that you all dive into your areas of expertise and ask our expertise is up here in their areas. So really, this is an opportunity for a safe space. No question is a dumb question. I always start with that. So please, by any means, just raise your hand, and then we'll get to you and we'll facilitate it that way. Thank you. All right, panelists. How have your experiences with neurodiversity impacted your life, either professionally or personally?
Kind of due to being on the spectrum, I get a lot less professional opportunities just because the way I speak, and obviously I'm out of context going everywhere right now. I'm super nervous, so I apologize. A lot of kind of, I call it double language, or trying to navigate through difficult culture, learning that as kind of like a second language and a dialect, and everybody that I come into contact with is a little individualized. So trying to learn what people mean by the things that they say, because direct communication is not really a strong point. And that kind of affects my personal life a little bit too, but that's the brunt of it, is trying to learn how to communicate with other humans.
So you all heard a lot of the professional things like I do in my practice. One of the like extra trainings like I've done in like my continuing education is like the art of utilizing like self-disclosure in like an ethically appropriate way in therapy, of being able to like connect with people in a more humanistic way, that like I am just not the beacon of helping you figure out your feelings and customizing your life. I'm also a human that has some lived experience too. So even just personally, like being a younger person with like very crippling anxiety and having a hard time like tests and like in school or whatnot. So like having like heavy things like happen in life and kind of flipping my perspective and like having a hard time with that same focus and level of motivation, like that really hard flip from introduction to like different trauma things and like learning about different mental health diagnoses before I was a therapist and whatnot. Definitely really helped me with some of these things that like I've learned from school and whatnot, of like letting people show up where they are and basically like, you know, defining some of these things. Cause like maybe like how I as a human define like the word love and like what love means to me might be a completely different framework from another person. So literally just find the humanistic level of like me as a person that has different connection points. Like how do I work with the client and like using like real life examples and whatnot to like help them feel more personable with the thing, to be able to connect the more research science-based coping practices of whatnot. Like how do I make it real? So that personal component I think is really an underutilized skill in working with the neurodiverse like population. Like we studied skills training, but like I as a human have my own adapted social skills to interact with life. So like how do I use that to like make a starting point of connection?
Yeah.
How can we promote collaboration and communication between behavioral health professionals, neurodiversity advocates, and individuals with lived experience to improve the outcomes and access to care?
So each one of us comes with our own unique experiences and contributions that we can bring to society, no matter what you do, who you are as a human. You got the baseline standpoint. So literally just like being curious about things, curious and open. Like I know a lot of things about a lot of things, but like there is not a level of perfection. And like each person that I interact with, like I pick up and learn things. Like I learn things from my clients about how to collaborate and do this differently. Like there's so much resources like available and information out there and whatnot. Like you can Google and search on those things, but if we don't have a level of a humanistic connection and like an awareness to some of these things, like it's hard. Like working as a team and looking at holistic wellness, like that wellness wheel that I put up, like I am not an expert in all of those areas. Like if you're looking at growing your physical wellness, like what team member can I connect you to do the thing? So like I want to acquire all the buddies in like my practice of therapy to be able to give people the right resource for what we need to collaborate to let you meet the wellness wheel goal.
So at this time, I'm going to ask the audience if anyone has any questions. They can be general, they can be to a specific panelist. You can choose. Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of been out in the ozone for a while, and I found my way home. Are we using the word human instead of person, or is that just this workshop specific?
Well, that's kind of like, that's more of a personal thing. I think I just started doing, like my clients joke and say like I have my own language with things. I typically start with the like, I'm just an existential being, have a humanistic experience, and sometimes it's a little bit too deep. So like I just defaulted to being a human. I love that you asked that though, because my first day teaching, like at the university, like someone raised their hand, like, and they still didn't know who I was. And they're like, why do you call everyone humans? And I was like, it's just the most neutral term that pops in my brain, that I'm not wrong if I'm like not sure who you are or how you identify. Like, so.
Well, it's certainly opens conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, are you Star Trek-y then? You know, you.
Yeah. I like the more like open world like video games that you can pick like your different class of like things, so you could be like a tile or like a cat. So I was like, oh, I usually pick the human one to like play the game. So I was like,
baby boomer, I don't get that reference. You know, that's kind of. Okay, thank you.
No, you're good.
Yes.
Jess, you were talking earlier about physical components, somatic and body. You would refer to fight and flight. I was at a seminar not too long ago where they incorporating freeze, and they're all self-food. Again, address that.
So we do a really good job. I have a really good spiral image that has a lot of the stuff that I'll send to you that I didn't have in the presentation. But there's like the fight, the flight, the freeze, the fawn, the like how do you accommodate to the different environments, and like we keep expanding and finding more of them too. When typically we have so much of that overstimulation, that freeze response, like that's how like your fight flight is like, okay, I have perceived a threat. I'm either fighting to neutralize this threat, or I am eloping from the area to get away from this threat. Like, is when those two like nervous systems, your sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, are like activating, like working. Your sympathetic system is like, it's go time. That freeze response, the most simplistic version I can think of is just the like your brain body are just like, nope, like there's not a frame to like process, do the things. Like you look a lot at like the bystander effect of like medical emergencies like occur. Like it's one of those scenarios where like we look for the adult to your adult. Like if we don't know or have a practice framework of something of like how to respond in a crisis scenario, our likelihood of freezing increases because it's like that's not something I have a framework for. So we're seeing, from my perspective as a therapist, I see a lot of my humans freeze when we don't have prior experience to like learning some of the coping skills to be able to have a go-to activity to do with a moment. So we just shut down because like we're not shutting.
Can you elaborate on what fawning might be?
So essentially, like you think I'm an analogy human. So like the bay deer, the fawn, like it doesn't walk very well. Like when it's first born, kind of just like collapses to like the environment and things. So like we do the thing where like we present in the way that like keeps us the safest and gives us the support. Like if you see like a human that is like more sad and crying, your likelihood to like scream and yell at the person typically decreases because we've identified, oh, this is a sadness factor. This person is emotionally dysregulated. So that fawn response is utilizing your brain and body's ability to like perceive the situation and kind of change your reaction to keep you the safest or whatnot. Like if you do the argument with your parents and like, you know, like it gets to the point where it's like, well, like I'm just like older, like I know more than you. So if you're having like a starting argument and like, you know, that is like a framework of like, well, like this is what I think, but like I know you're older and you probably know more things like about that than I do. So like you're like de-escalating the situation by kind of like capitulating to the environment to keep yourself safe. Because, you know, if you argue that point, it's going to be more threatening and you don't want to do that. If that helps.
No. So this might look like, I work with high school students when they are not doing as they're expected to do, where they'll say, oh yeah, I'll get all those assignments turned in and I'm going to come to school every day when you know dark I'll do it or not. Is that what?
Yeah, so like working with students, like I get the thing where I make all my students meet with me one-on-one because they struggle to write the paper, and if I don't like zone in on them, then like they're just like assimilating to the group. And like, so like they come to the auction, the first thing I ask is like, did you read the rubric, the assignment sheet? And then like you see them shit and yeah, like I read, and I'm like, listen, I said, we are all playing the game of life to get the most points. I care about you as a human. I don't care if you read, but if you tell me you read and you didn't, then the conversation I'm about to have with you is useless for you. So why don't you just tell me where you're at so we can maximize both of our time and you can play the game to get the highest grade like you're willing to do to like just be done. Like don't fawn to me. Don't tell me you read because you know it's the thing I'm supposed to do to avoid a lecture. I want to create an environment of safety where like just tell me what you did so we can work from it from there because I don't want to waste both of our times.
Before I call on you, Summer, slipped my mind to ask for you all that are asking questions, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, just your name and either your organization or even what realm of work that you're involved, because I think it's really important to know the people in the room, and we all, again, our expertise is in our own field, and this is another great networking opportunity, not only panelists to audience, but audience to panelists and amongst each other. So Summer, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Summer. I'm a licensed mental therapist and also have now a program
called 4 Kids Family Network, and also degree in human servants. So my question is it's actually combined for, how do you say, Jabril inquiries. Within the context of neurodiversity, can you shed a little bit of personal experience as to what your lens is with autism? Your lens of light. Because I know that I read in the bio that Jabril had raised someone with that experience, and you had personal fans.
Mine's also a little bit skewed because I'm late diagnosed. I had misdiagnosed really frequently, which is common to my age range. Can you specify what do you mean by experience necessarily? Like just my personal experience that I went through, or like what it
the lens of your perception.
Perception. This is a little bit convoluted just because this is kind of like abstract thought type stuff. So my lens through like how I move through everything is kind of like I'm put on a suit every day. When I walk outside, or even if somebody just sees me necessarily, it's kind of like an instantaneous fast. And it has that in a lot of different ways. But I've been trying to like also deprogram a lot of that. So I'm in like a really weird transitional phase. Trying to take care of my brain and also be a person that is easily accessible in the world is kind of like an inner conflict I just have all the time. So when I'm moving from space to space, acknowledging what people want from me, and then also like being able to put boundaries on that. And it's very hard because again, I operate very differently outside of that scope that they want me to, and I also have I think the term is called monotropic. So if my brain only really wants to go on a train, it wants to go all the way down the track to the end, and it won't stop unless somebody like tells me to stop. And so being in spaces where I have to multitask or generally switch topics or do something I'm not interested in, like that's a little painful. And like having to go through that and to kind of interact with that world, it's like a balancing act most of my life, honestly.
So you constantly have to kind of check in.
Yeah, it's like I try to explain it like autistic, non-autistic people's brains are more like automatic cars, and mine's more like a stick shift. Like even the words I'm saying right now, I have to think about individually before it comes out of my mouth. Otherwise, I'm going to mess it up.
Since sorry about the lifting, but how you explain it in the spirit.
Can you ask that again? I'm a little nervous.
You think the arts there in the sorry. You. Oh, good. I'm just kidding. I'll run up the back. In the framework of the conversation of neurodiversity, your experience of raising Sahir, what was that like?
That's my little brother. We're 4 years apart. So we lived in the same house, went to the same schools most of the time till about high school. My experience, I would say back then it was a lot more unknown. So a lot of the students would just didn't understand or couldn't relate. So it was a lot of like get on or religious judgment. Really judgmental. I got into a lot of altercations because that's my little brother, and he just seen that people picking on him, and that's pretty much what I would say.
A lot of protecting because of social problems.
Yeah, a lot of social problems. I believe it's because people just didn't understand autism or people on the spectrum. I mean, how good would you not be educated on?
Yeah.
Jabril, can you talk a little bit about Beautiful Minds? 'Cause I know as a colleague and as a close friend, but I think it would be really great for the group to know a little bit about not only, how you grew up with Sahir and taking care of him, but also how that led you to create Beautiful Minds.
Yeah, so it's an organization. We work with DD and we do like private, kind of private like healthcare, like all healthcare. We come up with different programs for individuals on the spectrum because they're all different, and we integrate in the community, help us be more independent, and also try to get them in the work field as well. I started the company back in 2020 during COVID. Last I got released from football, I came back home and I would do like flag football tournaments for my brother and his friends, and it just grew in a big thing. And family started asking me, do I do other programs and stuff? That's how I really got into it. And, growing up, it was a lot of programs for my brother, and just not having a lot of information all to in the specific area I live in as well. So I try to be more informative. And, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's answered. I think I answered it, and part of mine too. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Cheryl. I'm coming with Stark County, and I just wanted to make a comment. I have a 28-year daughter with autism, and she really struggles with anxiety and socially, and I just want to look on your courage to get up there. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes.
My name is Tiffany. I'm a son of DD. I'm going to pick on you again, Neurodiversity. Can you let us know what some of your challenges are that you're seeing?
So the question is, can you let us know what some of the challenges are that you are seeing?
With individuals or just in this field?
In general.
In general, really have the qualified people, just good people that's coming to actually help instead of looking at it as just a job. Come here, Al.
That's such fun.
Good one. I think we see that a lot in all of our areas, not just behavioral health. I know we do have a majority of behavioral health folks in the room, but for those in education, all of our systems, I think it's, finding, I say, centering everything with care. Not because you have to, but because you want to. And you genuinely want to be part of someone's support. And like I use the term village a lot. You want to be a part of a village to help support. Corey, I'm going to pick on you for a second and ask one of your questions. What role can family members, caregivers, and support networks play in promoting the mental health of the neurodivergent community?
There's a couple of things, honestly, and I pretty much agree with Jess a lot of things. A lot of the language that we use as family members, as caregivers, as these things, I feel like most of the time we're coming from a punitive mindset instead of a rehabilitative or holistic mindset. And so in the instances that I've gotten to read through different 504s and how people build them out and the language that they even use in that is especially if you are in the capacity and ability to help people look for certain little clue words. Like there's a difference between, I'll use my kid as an example. He has ADHD. It's moderate to severe, but he's very inattentive. But the way that a lot of the teachers, the way that a lot of the 504s will classify that as, well, he's doing something wrong by not paying attention. It's like, actually, no, he doesn't have the structural ability. And we can do like a lot of coping skills. I mean, learning a lot of different things and like a lot of different practices at home, especially, but kind of being willing to defend the person and want the best for them at any given point instead of looking for like what they're doing wrong. Because the other thing that happens a lot, especially when you kind of get wrapped up into these systems is that it tends to be the people who get diagnosed a lot, or the people who get like noticed a lot, are the ones who are causing the most trouble for society, and kind of going through that lens and framework automatically starts then at a disadvantage. And so I'm really big on making sure that like when we're talking about the humans that we're advocating for, when we're talking about even ourselves, I think that if you start even with better language for yourself and being nicer to yourself, that is a big point, because that will give you the grace and ability to do it for other people in your spheres. And that's kind of like my biggest point, I guess.
Thank you, Chloe. All right, this is a question for all three of you. So what are the most significant challenges that you feel this community faces when trying to access and navigate the system as a whole? Because you all have your own unique experiences and lived experiences, whether that be as a caretaker, as an individual with lived experience, as a clinician.
So I think one of the things that we don't account for is the level of privilege and assumptions that we make, just because there are resources and things out there. Like, that's the term that gets thrown around a lot. It's like, well, like if you're struggling, it's just like go to therapy or do that. But like the nuanced steps it takes to go to therapy and figure it out, like how do I find a therapist? Like, can I afford the therapy? Is this something that I could do consistently? If I can't afford, like on a financial standpoint, to do therapy, what's a reasonable accommodation that I could do to get a framework to learn some of these skills? Like, who do I mind? Who do I talk to? So like, we operate very much from the assumption that's like, yes, we are all doing the good work out there, but how do I connect the good work to the humans? And if the humans are struggling to even know what they need, how do we find the thing that they do need if they don't even know what they need? So like, doing things like this and talking to each other and like figuring out like what each of our little niche things is. It's like, I like joke and say the only reason I have Facebook is to acquire all of the humans possible. So like, I have money for a thing. So I'm like, ooh, I don't know enough about this, but this person works in this, it could do this. So like, they find the thing. Like, I feel again as like an advocate and like a clinician or whatnot, and my job is being a resource gatherer too, to like find the right fit for the person. It's like that big satisfaction you get when you get like the perfect gift for like someone. It's like representative that you've gotten to know them, and like you can see them. And I think being able to see a person, to like giving them the offering that they need to be more successful, is the biggest thing when it comes to like trying to like address like the challenge of like effectively doing that. Because if we at least help people feel seen, that there's something out there, we give them hope, and that's research-based, like the highest like probability of like successful outcomes and improved like ability to engage with life from therapy, from whatever your resource support is that hopefulness that like it can work, it creates something out there and you're not alone.
Thank you, Jess. You don't have to share if you don't want to. If you want to, go ahead.
For me, and a lot of the things that, and these are kind of bigger system things, and this is going to take more collective work than anything else. Legislation and education are really big, and gatekeeping a lot of things that are necessary. And I try to not think of it as like a boogeyman. I try to think of it as like something we can actively work in. It's more like we're a bunch of fish in the ocean, and like imagine that we all like the coral reef, and it like supports all of our needs and gives us all of our food, and it's like our ecosystem. And if that coral reef suddenly doesn't work, then that part of the ocean dies. And essentially what big systems do like that, it's like our coral reef. And so if that's not healthy, we're not going to thrive either. So like if there's not opportunity, if there's not education, if there's not the ability to get certain things, then it's going to make the whole community unhealthy. And I believe in a like holistic thing for everybody. And once you start helping those who can't help themselves, like it benefits everybody in the end.
Thank you, Corey. Summary.
They find to be some of the major features between autism as an adult versus a child?
So the question is main features between autism presented in children and then in adults.
It's kind of complicated because autism has a spiky profile. So essentially because it's on a spectrum, it doesn't really necessarily differ. Like I feel like when you start talking about the different needs, you can see them more heavily in children. And so like people will automatically want to take care of that more. But if you get left outside of that system, then you become an adult. And the terminology keeps changing, so I'm using the one that is most appropriate right now. I would be considered low support needs. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm better at anything. It just means that like I can basically move through the planet and acquire very basic things, even if it's at a detriment to my own health.
So it's no longer low function versus high function?
No, it's really complicated because, again, when we go back to community language, the community itself is really trying to hash out, because I don't ever want to leave out non-verbal people. I don't ever want to leave out like anyone who acts, looks, anything that is differently than me. I'm very aware of just autism being on a spectrum, and everybody kind of has different things. And even non-verbal right now, if I get too stressed out, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get words out of me. I will crawl into a hole. So it's less to do with adult versus kids in my general experience, and more to do with like, okay, what are your support needs, and how do they help benefit that throughout your life?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Megan Rhodes, and I'm a college counselor over at Walsh University. And Corey, not to single you out, but I do have a question for you that kind of goes along the same lines. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience being diagnosed as an adult or later in life. Like you said, you went through a period of time of misdiagnosis and then finally getting to that point. Because I have worked with students in the past and have noticed maybe certain traits, but flew under the radar a little bit when they were children. And just wondering more about that process for people that are developmentally a little bit older.
It is funny because I feel like we kind of come to it in our own way a lot of the times. I was actually working at Walsh when I was a janitor. I was a night janitor, and I was listening to a podcast, and the guy was explaining, and this is also an outdated term, he was explaining the term of Asperger's and going through his experience. I'm like, that's a lot of things all of a sudden that I relate to, and I've never related to a person on this level. That's strange. Okay. I got misdiagnosed, or even properly diagnosed. So like I got diagnosed with anxiety. I totally have anxiety, but that's only after I've been stimulated a certain way. That's only after I've been in like certain situations where like my brain is trying to process too much information and too many variables. And it's just like, no, we're done. I am not misdiagnosed with depression, but like I've never been hopeless. I've been like too tired to do anything. Like I will, as the kids say, lay in a pile of rot for a year or two because I can't function anymore. But it's never been like a sense of like deep sadness about like my interpersonal self. It's just like how I have to basically do things that I know are going to hurt me or take a lot of energy or like even the list of stuff. So really just like I like as an online test, and I believe it's developed by an autistic human being, but it's called the RADS-R test, RAADS-R, and they have a whole bunch of different worksheets, and they make it very clear that that is not a diagnostic tool from a doctor. It is just for you to see if you can find any signifiers that are common. So it really is just like an experiment to try to figure out yourself, essentially.
We'll share the link and any other resources throughout this entire training session. I'll make sure that me and Jess connect and we get all of that sent over to you all at the end of this training. Yes.
Marie, I have a question for you. So right now, children, like the wait for an autism diagnosis is about 3 years or so. And I think it's climbing. I don't think it's getting any better. Some kids are getting misdiagnosed or just not diagnosed at all. How important do you think it is as an adult to get diagnosed to understand your son?
Especially for like self-talk, because I went like 20, almost 30 odd years just thinking I was the weirdest person on the planet, and being completely alone in that experience. So even if they don't, and I do think it's important because it also gives you so much access to so much healthcare, which is another reason why I think a lot of people gatekeep it, because they think that we're just trying to get resources for free, which like I would pretend to be this way it's just not fun. Like, it's not fun to do this. Like, I love myself for sure, but like to try to go out in the world and do it, it's not worth whatever I'm trying to get. But anyways, the self-talk is super important. Even if not going to get resources, because like just knowing who you are as a human being, I think is important for anybody really. But like, especially when you don't have like that context, like I didn't see anybody like myself in media. I didn't see anybody else like myself and my friends. It was just very isolating. So not feeling isolated and knowing that I can exist this way, super important.
Justina, please.
Hi, I'm Justina Gorman. I work at Stark Marva Villiana. My scope is kind of substance use work, overseeing the opiate and addiction task force. So my question is around substance use. I guess, do you have any data or information about what substance use looks like in the neurodivergent population and what possible like implications for treatment might look like?
People are honest. Good, sir.
So again, this is another abstract concept because we're talking about different stimuli and the way that can go with it. I found I had to essentially be a person that I wasn't in order to survive when I was younger. So I have a little bit of experience with it, but it never got to a point where I would consider myself. It wasn't a detriment to my life. So I didn't know that there's studies coming out now that autism, ADHD, potentially with certain strains of THC, it actually helps you focus. And like it was funny because like I never actually liked being high, but I did like when I smoked that I could do my homework and I started getting like better grades. Like that would like, again, I don't really. I have mixed feelings about all sorts of medication, but it's not like it's such a big topic that like I feel unqualified. But I just know that especially for neurodivergent people, even like depressed and anxious people, like the reason that you want to do those things 9 times out of 10 is because you're looking to feel normal. You're looking for equilibrium. You're looking to fit, like whatever, there's something that is inside of you that needs filled, and this looks like a good solution currently. So you're going to see a lot of that, especially with neurodivergence, just because like we are very aware that there's something that is just off or missing or whatever. A lot of verbiage what use for that.
So one of the experiences I've had too is co-facilitating a group using the model. It's called Seeking Safety, and I have some material on that too. I can connect with you, but basically it is acknowledging that substance use is typically a comorbid diagnosis with some level of trauma or stress. So when you look at it from like, we're talking a lot about language up here. So it makes sense that the neurodiverse population that has an unmet need, does not have a sense of community to communicate that, doesn't properly get a label to identify their feelings of the things. If we have an unmet need, if we are hungry, we seek food. So like if you have an entire sensory situation where you are dysregulated and not able to meet that need, and you find something that either takes the edge off or meets some of the needs enough to feel better, you're gonna do it because your body is going under stress that you want to alleviate. We function like work towards homeostasis and balance. So that Seeking Safety program works a lot with identifying functions of addiction and how you identify your values, like what gives you hope. Like research-based evidence shows that the highest level of like recovery, like harm reduction, like cease of use of like different substances that are identified as maladaptive in that way is your level of connection to community, your level of connection with yourself, and like I said earlier, your hope that like it can actually be better. If you have found something that makes you feel better, like I'm gonna be pretty mad as a person to like lose that and have to go back to the normative like societal like expected thing and not have a resource that helps me feel like I'm able to engage in what the societal norm is. So if we're not replacing the unmet need with something that connects to the person, like it's just going to be the endless cycle of it. So, but I'll send that the resource.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So when I always like to do panelists or just Q&As in general, I always like to touch on positive things, some success stories, different initiatives that we've all seen. And I'm really grateful that this panelist and these panelists all have lived experience, whether as a caretaker or identifying it themselves, but also as a system and then as agencies as well. So my question to all three of you is, can you share any success stories, initiatives, programs, anything like that that has effectively promoted the inclusivity of neurodiversity, whether that's as an organization, as a system, or just something that, you know, has been done at the community level?
So my hype success story is not necessarily as spread on a greater community level, but it's like those little things that give me hope that we can spread and do cool stuff. So my demographic of clients, I attract a lot of the neurodiverse crew, and so there's a lot of language and terms and whatnot, and so talking about the things, I called it neurospicy, because there was just so many different components of your brain, your body, your labels and whatnot. So spicy is a little flair. It's a little ooh, weren't expecting that. So we joked, and it's I was talking with a client, and I was well, it's kind of like the Taco Bell sauce packet. You never know when you're going to get the level of spicy for a thing. So this human made me a sticker that said neurospicy with the sauce packet on it. And I was oh my gosh, I love this. That connected enough with them that they individually went out to prompt it and do the thing. So it's been a thing I've talked about with clients. It's been adopted in my language vocabulary, and I've talked about it more. So told it to a client, had another client talk about it with just another human in their world. This other person ordered a custom pillow, of the sauce packet with the neurospicy label, and added an ingredient label of the different parts that made up that specific human. So now we have a neurospicy pillow sauce packet that has an ingredient label of what makes this person this human. And in my brain, I'm man, if everyone would come with their own little ingredient label or little neurospicy sauce packet of what made them then, that would be so much easier trying to interact with the world. So my goal now is to give everybody a neurospicy pillow or I don't know. For me, it makes it fun too. We want to shift to more positive language. We're just trying to figure out a way to fit in and get some good dopamine hits with each other and feel nice and connected. So I don't know if that makes me so happy. I could put it on my house, I could stare at it every day, and I was got the neurospicy crew. Okay, we got this.
I had a situation with one of the guys in the serve. He was in school in the same class as my little brother, so they were saying all the same programs and stuff at middle school and elementary school, and even high school. So they kind of ever grade each other. At school, he was like a bully in the class with the other individuals on the spectrum, and he just was so angry all the time, always hitting people, taking the food and stuff, and they never knew why. So fast forward, when I started the company. His grandmother reached out to me, and we started serving this individual out of his house, out of her house, because he stayed with her, and he was being locked in rooms and deprived of food to make him act a certain way and stuff. So now I started making a connection with his behaviors in grade school and whatnot, and we end up taking him into one of our homes, and a situation occurred where she was taking his money and stuff, and basically not giving him the supports that we're intending for him to help him live day to day. And we ended up giving him a official guardian outside of his grandmother, and he's doing wonderful now. like washing dishes, washing his clothes, helping cook, going out in the community, where before he was wearing a diaper, just a whole bunch of things. So it was one of those situations where I felt really amazing about it, especially knowing him as a kid, and to see how he did a total 180. Is even talking now, it's just amazing. That's my story.
I think that this is important, mainly because I know that, especially humans on the spectrum, we consider ourselves part of the disability community. And so my inspiration is the Capital Crop, which got the ADA started. I try to remember the year, but my stress recall is super low today. So, but essentially, like disabled activists went and crawled up the stairs to the Capitol. That's why we have the ADA now. The other thing is that when I learned a language and taking that back to my community and being able to see the other humans use that for their own benefit and navigating their own life and stresses better, just seeing that the ability for humans to be able to do that and kind of like spread that idea and that hopefulness, it keeps me going, honestly. I like that there are more people out there who are willing to do the work and are willing to, also help and spread the word for that. So it's really nice.
Thank you. I'll take questions from the audience. Yes.
Yes, hi. I had a question about the phone line. You live in Akron, right?
The main branch is located in Akron, but we serve Medina and come all the start and Medina to
start. Do you work with adults?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. So, look, can you tell me some of the other things that you do in the organization?
We provide in-home care, transportation, we have a nurse on staff, couple nurses on staff. We have a day rehabilitation programs, vocational programs as well. So if the individual want to get a job in the community, we'll help them get grace, certain jobs.
Do you happen to have like any socializing events or anything like that?
We do social social events within the company with all our individuals.
Thank you. The question. So let's do about age range.
The age range.
Anywhere there's 6 and up.
No. Two little bit tests. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
So we're raising kids in this world that really focuses on, not being completely inclusive of neurodiversity. And their self-confidence takes a huge hit. I mean, my son, I'm talking about in specific, he can come home and I can tell him all day, you're a great person. You're doing good things. Like you're doing the best you can. But that doesn't change what society is telling him. And that's how he has to grow up in this world. And unfortunately, as an adult, I'm seeing the same thing just in the professional world, that there's just not a lot of room for neurodiversity. So how do we give our kids and the youth of this country the confidence to carry when you're neurodivergent, you're really cool. I mean, you look at things so different. I mean, you don't see things from the same lens as everybody else. So how do you secure that and help them get to adulthood and hang on to those really awesome strengths that come with neurodiversity without letting it kill their self-confidence and make them almost jaded for this world? How do you do that in your opinions?
So our role as the adultier adults in the terms of like raising the small humans, we are not setting them up to be successful in society. From the biological standpoint of and this is more my biased perspective from like working with multiple demographics. I used to teach before a public education before I was a counselor. I worked in the elementary school and now working higher end, all the grades in between. We do not, like I touched about a little bit with like some of the media consumption things, like I talked about your brains and like the synapses and like how all those things fire. Because of the world that we live in, we are modifying the ways that we learn and receive information. We are changing the way that the brain has initially been able to like form and grow these different things, and we're cutting off access to that by some of the overflooding of technology. We have, and it's newer research because we've just been able to like research it more with like different demographics, but we are seeing the like screen kids and whatnot that spend more time on like the technology or whatnot, lacking the ability to independently problem solve and like utilize these coping skills if it's not like right in front of them anyway. So like this thing that I see of like being able to like help like the neurodivergent community, that's essentially just helping humans be more connected to themselves as humans. Like don't even need like the label of specific diagnoses. If we reduce the exposure to that numbing thing of some of the media stuff, like this is a societal thing that we as a culture, we don't shift, it's just going to grow and get worse from that perspective. If we reduce that access to some of like the social media stuff and the rally tech, it doesn't even have to just be social media, but recent surveys with the like youngest generation, like now are saying that like they feel the most disconnected. Their mental health is at an all-time high. And they also don't feel like secure in friendships and relationships. So we're flooding them with social media to be able to interact and be with that. But like then when we get in front of each other, we don't know what to do. So we're not fulfilling that social bubble, and then that impacts all the other bubbles on your wheel. So the clinical suggested thing that I think if we adopted as a society, we would see a better balance would be reducing the screen time, not doing and like, and this sounds very like specific, but this is like the theme I see, like we need that independent play. Like think how excited adults are when like you get to do fun activities. Like you ever go to like the like Sky Zone and stuff, like the adults are living their best life. Like what and eating and like running and going through the pit. Like it's training your brain to be able to problem solve. Like if you can't move a certain way and do a certain thing, like sounds like me breaking a body part, trying to like overcompensate for like my age with like the physical stuff. But so like letting people have those opportunities to connect in varied ways is going to help them identify what they like and what they don't like. Now, I grew up as a gamer nerd, but like very much so connected with people in a way that like I was able to be like, yeah, this gaming fulfills this thing. Love my screen time, had far too much of it as like a younger human, but like having exposure to different environments and kind of being forced to do some of the different things just to try, because we're not being punitive, but like giving people the options and like engaging with different things, not just from some of the tech that is literally rewiring how the chemicals in our brain are firing. And I mean, I'm hoping to be challenged from that too, but I'm not seeing another way to shift that other than trying to reduce some of the flooded technology stuff and have a diverse experiences to customize what you do actually enjoy and raise healthier humans. But that's more neat.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi. My name's Crystal, and I work with Bidwell Industries of Greater Cleveland and East Central Ohio. I have a question for you a little bit further just on what you were just speaking about. So how do you feel, or what is your suggestion for the schools are now, that the classrooms, the teachers, the education is all technology-based? My youngest is a senior this year, and the school that he goes to, they don't even have any actual books anymore. They carry around Chromebooks. Every classroom has a Google Classroom. That's where all their assignments are, all their study guides are, all the PowerPoints and whatever presentations they have to do. They have to Google search and find, everything through the internet. So they're going to come across the other four platforms of social media, news outlets, whatever, all this other stuff. But the schools are kind of encouraging, or maybe not encouraging, but maybe trying to fall in line with today's society, that's the direction we're going in, but
So this would definitely take me, like, society kind of operates on like a pendulum. Like when we look at history, like we have like an extreme of a thing occur and then it swings back because inertia and all those laws that we've proven and whatnot. But in a societal sense, like we have learned the technology things and are very excited. So like we are going to do the things. It makes things simpler. And now we're seeing symptomology come up. That's like, okay, it makes things simpler, but like long-term you is like not feeling super happy about all this stuff. So like it would be a transition period. I mean, if I got to pick all the rules, I would be like, we would have a no phone like type thing. And like, yes, you're still going to utilize technology because it's part of society and you have to be taught to do that. But diversifying those experiences and whatnot, like we can look at like, even just on a biological level, like, yeah, everybody has to use this technology in the brain books. Are we doing anything about giving people blue light glasses with like doing that like impacts like the level of like how it's working with your brain? Are we like, okay, doing all the thing on the classroom? Do we do like a movement activity where you're not just looking at the screen? Like, and also like, yes, we have the technology, you can Google anything, but like, what, like, do you know how to Google? Like, we're not even like, because they have the technology, it's like, here you go, figure it out. We're not teaching them how to utilize technology as a strength. One of the assignments I do in class is like the students have to find a popular article that they're more likely to read because like they're not really like me, they're not just going to deep dive into psych research articles. So I'm like, okay, I have to make you do this. So like we have to pick a popular article that cites a specific research article and make them read both. And like, tell me what the differences are. How do you know this is like a real article that like has like facts and data to it? I have a lot of athletes, so I use the analogy of like working out. Everybody has a different like perspective on like diets and fitness and things and whatnot. Like, how do you know? Like, I could Google like, how do I lose weight? And I'm going to be flooded with 80 million things. So like, the people that like, the Atkins diet was super popular. And so we realized that like our brains actually need carbohydrates for energy. And now our brain is not creating the right things that we need. And we're not absorbing them, like we don't have energy. So then we're like, okay, carbs are good. Now fats are bad. Well, now we're not absorbing the nutrition for anything, and we're just like running on fumes and have brain fog and whatnot. So like we're trying to figure it out, but like we're doing just the technology. And it's like, okay, because you can Google a thing, I don't have to retain the things, but like deleted so many aspects of like that wellness wheel. Like we're not physically moving. We're not in our environment because we're like focused on the screen stuff or it's impacting our ability to engage with it. We have a flooded of social things, but then a diffusion of responsibility to engage with it. Like, financially, like the cost of some of these tech things and like socially fitting in. That's the biggest thing. Like if you're like a 10, 11-year-old now, if you don't have a smartphone, like you're like, what are you doing like with life? Like, because that's how you connect and like engage with each other. So it's trying to find the accommodations to like balance it because it's just very out of balance right now.
I wanted to go back to the question, Ashley. I think parents and leaders who need to get out in the community and be more informative and do more stuff out in the community so other people around us are more aware and more informed about it. I think a lot of the problems, at least when I was growing up, is people just don't know and don't have a connection to it. So I think we get out in the community and show what's going on, show the people that are in our community that need certain help, certain services, go through certain problems, they'll have a better connection and more of an understanding. And all we can do really is control what we can control. So that's.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Christopher, and my background is substance abuse. In the 12-step community, the idea of spirituality is fundamental and has resulted in a lot of success. In a neurodiverse population, or even from a theory, what does spirituality, as broad as that is, how does it impact? Is it a personal more than a programmatic? Comments?
So one of the things in therapy that I work with people on trauma, one of the trainings I've done is like the impact of like cults and like spiritual abuse and whatnot, and how that language and that structure has been kind of weaponized like a little bit, like kind of how we talked about with like some of the labels and like stigmas and stereotypes that come with those labels. So looking from the 12-step like model, like the connection is very much more so related. It's not like one spiritual entity. Like we're not picking like one religion to be like the right like religion. Like, so that notion in itself is the spirituality component, is accommodating to the sense of like, it is a connection to a higher power. Like it is a neutral language thing that you get to customize and define for you. Again, the study is about hope and resiliency, supporting like sobriety, harm reduction, and whatnot. You want something to believe in, and that sense of community is creating a connection to other humans that share different values, goals, and different things. That level of spiritual purpose is kind of like society's open-ended, free-form version of like, we're allowed to have structure and rules that help us like live our life according to our values. Like we like the labels and whatnot, and being able to pick our values. Spirituality is one of the most open-ended ways to like pick your values and beliefs and have people argue with you about it less, essentially. Like everybody's going to have their different perspectives and frameworks on like what we view as like right or wrong, but like in the distress tolerance things, like multiple things can exist. Like I can't prove what a higher power thing would look like, and I like tell people in counseling, like I don't care if you pray with a rosary, if you sit and skip rocks at like a pond, if like you have like a book that you just feel like really connects and like speaks to like your soul. The connection is the point that I want the people to have. So from that spiritual component, it's almost like the miscellaneous catch-all category for the wellness wheel. Like that's where you get to customize it as you need it to help you connect with like a purpose of like what you believe in, why you're doing what you're doing. Like all of us have different experiences like on this panel and this audience of like why do you do what you do? Like what motivates you to do the thing? Like, and if like your grounding factor is like, well, like I'm aligning my values with like what would Jesus do as like a person? If like that connects with you and you are using it in a way to foster your growth and not ostracize people, totally here for it. Like as long as it's not harm to self, others, like we're not breaking like exuberant laws of like things that like threaten the safety of like the community, like that's your free form to like get to pick like what you're working towards is kind of how I view it.
Just a hot topic.
Spirituality? Is that what you mean? Mm-hmm.
It's a hot topic.
Spirituality is a hot topic or religion? Oh.
I hear there's two different things, but the concept of blending mental health with spirituality is a hot topic. It's always been the conversation lately. So, yeah.
Again, in my secondary role of primary therapist, secondary resource gatherer, there's a blog post by Dr. Wright. She was like one of the leading people in trauma and research with like addiction and dissociative identity disorder and trauma-informed care. She actually did a blog post that I'll send out with the stuff too, about how we as like clinicians and people need to stop like stigmatizing ourselves when we incorporate things like that. Like it's okay to be different like flavors and like off the wall of things. Like I'm not telling a person a right or wrong spiritual practice, but like I as a human have an individualized practice and methodology of like therapy and whatnot. Like we know like moving our body is like a thing to do to like help regulate your nervous system. Like I act ethically within my role as a therapist, and like I'm not going to tell like people how to like work on their fitness goals. Like, but I do have a like background in fitness and like was a dance and fitness instructor with like Zumba and whatnot, and like still go teach at like charity things. So like I have a framework of that is connected with like resources and supports and things. So like being able to acknowledge that like I maybe don't do the thing in the most typical way, but like I don't mean to act like there's a one size fit all per se. Like it's okay to be someone who like engages in Reiki, like does like mindful movement. Like we got to stop like being mad at ourselves that we're doing things differently, because that's how we learn how to do different things. So as long as we're not doing harm to people and like working within our world to like give people options, like
that's kind of the framework. If that answered your question a little bit, or your topic that you were seeking, the spiritual versus like the hot topic of like how we talk about spirituality and counseling, because like I'm not like counseling people on like how to develop a religious practice or spiritual practice, you know what I mean? But I'm just teaching them like how to connect with themselves, what they like, why do they like it, that is, like what is the connection point?
Ashley. Oh, okay. All right. I just have one more closing question, and then if anyone else has any last minute remarks, because I know we're close to the end of this. So in thinking about the realms of specific organizations or agencies, I know, Jabril, you're up in Akron with the Summit area, but you serve different counties as well. Jess and Corey, you guys are down here in Stark. But just thinking of your network and all the people that you know, how can organizations and agencies specifically create environments that are inclusive for those that are neurodivergent, but more importantly, fits their needs? So whether that's in vocation, so trying to be in the workplace as a neurodivergent individual, trying to go to events, trying to be in the community.
I would say the biggest like starting point, because like each of these are like, we'll need to grow like specific niche areas to fit like how to like labels in terms of like diagnoses, like how do I accommodate for someone with autism? How do I accommodate for someone with ADHD? How do I accommodate for someone with PTSD? Like those are niche things that as we learn about the diagnoses, we figure out different therapeutic styles and resources that support them. But from a very rudimentary framework, because I definitely like to work from like the foundation up about things, is visibility is our strongest form of advocacy as like people in the world. So like if we're doing like these activities to like promote neurodiversity, like have reasonable like accommodations for the things. Like when we do like activities or events things, is there an area that's like, if you're sensory overloaded, that you can take a step back to like not have to be in the middle of like the things that are going on? Like in terms of like queer advocacy, like having like a pride shirt or something like that on, or like something that identifies that like I am a human with a different experience. Like I don't fit into a one size fit all category of things. We want to see the representation of people being supported in their differences to do the thing in a successful way. So if we can get more people to work collaboratively and like have simply visibility of like, oh, like this person like is at an event and like has like headphones on, like we don't even like think about it in like the same way as much anymore, versus like 20 years ago, maybe like, why does this person have like noise canceling headphones in the way? Like being visible and just giving yourself an awareness that like humans do things differently, and if we're not hurting other people, like it's okay, it doesn't bother you.
I agree, Bert.
This is going to sound a little silly at first, but when you go back to whatever organization you're in, being more open to educating yourself on various things. And I don't think that anyone expects everyone to know everything. That's kind of impossible. But just like being educated to the point where you are open to the possibility that if somebody is acting in a manner or way that is not something you believe is normal for that space, to be able to evaluate it. You really want to activate your critical thinking in your own spaces, but also be willing to be the jerk. I have been in many positions where I have to be the person who's like, oh, well, authority, I have to talk to you about this thing. It's going to go great. I have the best words right now. And just kind of be willing to be the squeaky wheel, because that's what gets the oil. Like nothing, again, because we live in the very typical culture that we do, nothing gets fixed unless somebody thinks it's broken. And if no one knows and no one speaks more about that, then it's just not going to happen. So you gotta kind of go out and do that thing, and that will move more organization forward.
Thank you. Any last questions before we close? Well, I want to thank each of you as panelists. Again, thank you, Jazz, as a presenter.
I have business cards on the table over there. Please steal them and talk to me so I can make connections and acquire more buddies. It's my goal coming here today to also teach people.
Yes. And thank you to each and every one of you who showed up, remained, really positive throughout all this, and hopefully you took something away and you're able to apply it to your everyday work in whatever realm that you're in. Just again, please take the time to fill out the evaluation at the end of the bio packet, because we really, really do appreciate it. It's really quick. It's not a lengthy survey, so make sure you get those two. And like I said, we'll distribute presentations, resources, and everything over the next few days. So thank you again, and safe travels back to where you're going. What was that? Yes.
Yeah, it's my